and welcome to the Mini Sculpting Super Show. I'm your host Tom Mason, and I am super excited to be back doing these videos again. So just a quick recap for people that are joining this for the first time, or if you forgot because it's been a while. The Mini Sculpting Super Show is a show about miniatures, mainly focusing on sculpting them, teaching you how to do it, sharing the knowledge I've come up with over many years of doing this professionally. So this is episode number 12, and today's video is on parting large miniatures. This is the last video that I was creating based on votes submitted by my patrons. So they've asked for this video, and I wanted to make sure that when I came back, this was the first one that I did and got done before moving on to some other topics and subject matters. But before we get into the tutorial video, I wanted to share a quick note that my good friend and fellow sculptor Trey Manor is running another Kickstarter. It's called Warbands of the Cold North 3, and it has less than a week left right now, but these are great miniatures, and I encourage all of you to go to the link here and check it out. If it's not here, I'll put it down in the description. And yeah, I love Trey's figures, and I've recently gotten to Frostgrave, and these miniatures are perfect for that. I mean, if you like Trey's stuff, you're going to get these figures anyways, but if you need some really cool figures to play in Frostgrave and you're a Frostgrave fan, it's a no-brainer. So head on over there, support him, and let's get on to the sculpting tutorial. So here we have Taraxis. This is an extra large model that I made for Myth Journeyman, and he's probably about 90 millimeters tall from his feet to the top of his back there. What I'm showing you here is I've actually already removed one arm and twisted it off. I'll get into that more in a minute. Here's some of the tools that you will need to start cutting large figures. Number one is a good razor saw, or my mini saw in this case. This is an Anderson mini saw, and you can get it at Contenti. It's a really great tool, especially for doing those large initial cuts, and it's very cheap and it fits in your hand easily. It's not overly bulky. Another great saw you can get is just called a razor saw, and it's a much larger, substantial piece, and while it can be a bit easier to use, it's much more bulky. This thing having just such a thin saw blade really allows you to get in from different angles and in different ways. So anyways, as you can see here, I'm going in and starting to saw the figure, keeping in mind that you want to try and create at least two planes as you're sawing in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in from one angle from the top here, and when I end up going down to the bottom, I'm going to cut it in a different angle. Oh, now there you go. This is one bad thing about the mini saw, is that it can pop out of the clamp very easily, and it can also break. So this is happening mainly because it's in such a large figure, so there's a large area to cover. If you were to use it on a smaller miniature, then you probably wouldn't have that same issue. Which reminds me, as far as the blade, so when you go to Contenti's site and buy the blade, or the saw, you buy the clamp as one piece, which you saw the link earlier, but you also need to buy the saw blade, and I believe I would use the .0067, which is pretty thin. They have some others that are a little thicker. Obviously, the thicker it is, the more material will be cut away from the miniature. Typically, it's still pretty minimal though, so you won't have to patch up. However, as you'll see towards the end of the video here, it will leave a little bit of a gap, but with the figure being so large, it's pretty minimal. Okay, so as you saw, I was having a little bit of trouble with the mini saw because it was just so large. And so what I wanted to show here is that you could also, and there's the two angles I was talking about here, and what that will do is it'll create a natural socket and help align, not a socket, but it'll help align the pieces together when they come apart. So what I'm doing here is I've taken an X-Acto blade, and I'm cutting a little bit with the tip, but you need to be extremely careful when you're using the tip. When you're using when you're cutting on large figures like this, you want to cut as far down the blade as possible where it's thicker, and will have a lot more strength. I should really also cover one additional step that I didn't really mention in this one, mentioned in the first video, which you can see here on this kind of cutting series for small miniatures, and that is to score the armature. So in the very beginning I was showing you how I was kind of twirling the arm. Well, what I was showing you there is I actually pre-scored before I put anything on this guy. I built the armature, and then I pre-scored the armature with a file and or some snips. So you put a little bit of pressure on the wire, and that compromises it, for lack of a better term. Not enough that it'll break off easily, but enough that when all of the putty is on there and it's baked and ready to be separated, there's a natural hinge point, a natural break point that will occur on the miniatures, so that you can pop it apart. And it's very, very important to do on these large figures, because as you can see, his armature is made, well, you probably can't tell, but it's a thicker wire than normal. I think I used 22 gauge, and it's 2 wires twisted together, so it's very substantial. So yeah, I made the main cuts, as you saw, with the saw and then the X-Acto blade, and now I'm going in with this scalpel, and the reason for that is I can push very, very deep with a much smaller amount of the blade, plus not risking it breaking the blade, and that is very important to be able to get in there and cut away all the extra parts there. I think here I'm trying to show you a little bit more about how I pre-scored the armature. Now that I've cut so much of the material away, you just have to twist it. You just have to use a little bit of force on the figure to break any last small little pieces, and just start to pull it away. And as you see, there was a lot that could still be cut away, but now that I pulled the arm away from the body, I can get in there and just kind of cut away just a little bit more from the miniature. So just going back in there, trimming off some extra pieces, and you might see some large bits come off. Don't worry about that. That's okay if you lose that, because it's all on the inside. When the arm is put back on there, you won't be able to tell that it's missing. If a big chunk comes off the outside of the armor body, that's a problem. Okay, now you can see that I pulled it away some, and I'm able to start twisting it, and it's twisting right on the score lines that I made on the armature before I even sculpted this figure. And it should pop off here in just a second. There we go. And it was actually a little bit farther down the line, which is nice, because if you do want to be able to build up some sort of socket, you actually have a bit of a start point there with the armature left around. However, because of the nature of this figure going into plastic, and I wouldn't do that engineering portion anyways, all I need to do is make sure and clean it up, and that's what I'm doing here. Get off all this excess and just try and make it have that clean alignment that I was talking about earlier by making those 2 angled cuts into the arm. And so what that'll require is cleaning off the material, and then we will actually have to snip off the excess armature. And while you watch me do some of this cleaning, I'll reiterate the tools that I've been using, would recommend. Number 1, you'll need some snips and or little files to score the armature underneath before you even sculpt the figure. I usually use snips. That's the best way but you just have to be very careful so you don't want to accidentally cut the armature. Number 2 is a razor saw or a mini saw, and these the razor saws can be purchased at any craft store, Hobby Lobby, Michaels, and plenty of online places. Oops, I dropped it. Next is a scalpel and or an X-Acto blade. Either one works. I like to have both. I feel like I have different types of control on different stages with both, and I really like the scalpel just because it's a more substantial blade all the way around, so I don't feel like it's going to break as easily. Alright, so you see me here, I'm just continuing to clean up the arm there. And I actually cleaned off a few extra parts too, that parts of the body that kind of went with the arm that made it look a little like it had a ledge on it. So and here I'm just gonna finally snip off the armature here. I think what I noticed happening here as I started to snip it was that I was gonna snip very high on the wire because it was twisted. It was naturally pushing my snips up. So what I did there is I just untwisted it, and that allowed me to push into the model a little bit and snip one wire at a time. So there was the first one, and did I do it? It looks like I got them both. And same thing on the other arm, which is already done. Twist it off, and then we will snip it. Now you go back, you get each arm or each piece. In this case, this is 2 arms, and you want to go back and try and set them on each area they were cut away from. And the reason for that is you just need to make sure that it will sit flush, because when you cut something away from an armature, you can have some clay or the armature itself still sticking out, and it can make the pieces not sit flush like they're supposed to. So that's what I was doing there, just trimming off. Sometimes you trim off a little more armature, sometimes you just need to hollow out the other piece. As you can see, there's already a bit of a hole, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So rather than keep worrying about cutting away that armature piece, which is proving pretty difficult, just popped out a little material there, and that actually would create a little bit of a minor natural socket for it to pop in as well, which will help me when I had to create the final assembled version of this piece to send to production. So there you have it. That's how you part large miniatures. Obviously, there's going to be different hurdles depending on what you're doing, but those are the big things. Pre-score the armature, saw and or cut with those different blades, and then clean it up to make sure that it will align properly. From there, you can go and add a socket to create more stability, which is very good to do on these larger miniatures anyways, since there's plenty of room for it. So, while this video finishes up, I just want to thank everybody for watching these videos again. I'm super excited to be back doing the Mini Sculptor Super Show, and I've got a lot of cool ideas of how I'm going to keep doing this. So thank you very much for watching, and everyone's support on Patreon. Couldn't do it without you guys, and I am excited to show you what's next. So keep sculpting.